People interested in true crime are always baffled by the why. Why would someone do these things? What path in life could possibly have led them to commit such atrocious acts? In this podcast, we aim to explore the upbringings and backgrounds of some of history's worst criminals, but with a twist. Because we want you to set aside what you already know about them, we won't use their names until the end of the show so you can listen anew and hopefully get insight into the question that haunts us the most. Why did they do it? Join us as we explore the catalyst. The night of June 28, 1984 was warm in Los Angeles. 79-year-old Jenny Vinkow lived alone in a small apartment in Glassell Park, a quiet neighborhood where people still felt safe enough to leave windows open for the breeze. She had no reason to expect danger. Someone had been watching. He had noticed the open window, the screen that could be easily removed, the absence of security measures. He moved silently through the darkness, patient and methodical. When he climbed through that window, Jenny Vinkow had no warning and no chance to scream for help. The next morning, her son Jack arrived to check on his mother. He noticed immediately that something was wrong. A window screen missing, the front door unlocked, his mother's belongings scattered around the apartment. And then he found her body. Her throat had been slashed so deeply she was nearly decapitated. As the picture slowly came into focus for Jack, he screamed out to the apartment manager, "My mother's been murdered." The brutality was shocking, seemingly motiveless. Police had no suspects or clear leads. It appeared to be an isolated incident, a burglary gone wrong maybe, or a random act of violence. They had no idea they were looking at the beginning of a reign of terror that would grip Southern California for over a year, leaving at least 13 people dead and dozens more traumatized. This was the work of a predator who defied every pattern law enforcement relied upon. He had no specific type of victim. He killed men, women, children, the elderly. He had no consistent geographic area. His attacks ranged across Southern California from Los Angeles to San Francisco. He used different weapons, different methods, left different signatures. The randomness itself became his signature, making him nearly impossible to predict or to catch. But long before he became one of America's most feared serial killers, he was just a boy growing up in El Paso, Texas. A boy subjected to violence and trauma who learned from his own family that killing was acceptable, even admirable. His story is a case study in how monsters are made. This is the story of a man we'll call the Wildcard. He was born on February 29, 1960, a leap year baby in El Paso. He was the youngest of 5 children born to Julian and Mercedes in a Mexican-American family struggling to make ends meet. His father had been a police officer in Mexico before immigrating to the United States, where he found work with the railroad. But Julian brought with him demons that would poison the entire household. Julian was an alcoholic with an explosive temper. When he drank, which was often, he became violent, beating his wife and children for infractions real or imagined. There was no safety in that home, no refuge from his father's rage. The boy learned early that violence was how problems were solved, that fear was how control was maintained, and that men expressed power through physical force. The abuse was so severe that the boy suffered multiple head injuries before he turned 6 years old. He was knocked unconscious repeatedly, falls and blows that very likely caused traumatic brain damage. These weren't minor bumps. These were injuries serious enough to cause seizures, to potentially damage the very neural pathways responsible for impulse control and emotional regulation. Later in life, psychiatrists would note that he suffered from temporal lobe epilepsy, increased aggression, and hypersexuality, all potential consequences of those early head injuries. To escape his father's violence, the Wildcard would sometimes sneak out of the house at night and sleep in a nearby cemetery. While other children his age were tucked away safely in their beds, he found more peace among the dead than among the living. That macabre environment, sleeping among gravestones, contributed to what would become a lifelong fascination with death and darkness. By age 10, he had already started using marijuana and alcohol. By 12, his life would take an even darker turn when his older cousin Miguel, who went by Mike, returned from the Vietnam War and took the Wildcard under his wing. Mike had served as a Green Beret in Vietnam, and he had come back fundamentally changed. He wasn't haunted by what he had done. He was proud of it. He was energized by it, and he wanted to share it. Mike showed the Wildcard Polaroid photographs, not vacation photos or family pictures, but images of Vietnamese women he claimed to have raped, murdered, and dismembered during his service. Some of the photos showed women tied to trees or wooden posts, captured before and after they were sexually assaulted and killed. Mike didn't present these images with shame or regret. He presented them as trophies, as proof of his power. The Wildcard later said he wasn't repulsed by what Mike had shown him. No, he was fascinated. Surely a healthy child might have been traumatized or sickened, but this boy, already shaped by his father's violence, already brain damaged from years of abuse, saw something different. He saw strength and control. He liked to see what men were capable of when they had complete power over someone weaker. Mike went beyond just showing the boy photographs. He taught him. He shared military techniques for stealth, for moving silently, for attacking from behind. He explained how to kill efficiently, how to ensure victims couldn't fight back, how to avoid leaving evidence. He told the boy, having power over life and death is a high, an incredible rush. It's godlike. You control who lives and who dies. For 3 hugely formative years, from age 12 to 15, the Wildcard absorbed these lessons. Mike became the mentor his father never was, someone who paid attention to him, who made him feel special, who shared secret knowledge. The fact that this knowledge was about rape and murder didn't register as wrong. In the boy's warped understanding of the world, this was what powerful men did. Then, on May 4th, 1975, when the Wildcard was 15, he witnessed something that would cement every twisted lesson Mike had taught him. He was at Mike's house when his cousin got into an argument with his wife, Jessie. The argument escalated. Mike pulled out a handgun and shot Jessie in the face, killing her instantly. The boy watched her fall, watched the life leave her body, watched Mike calmly deal with the aftermath. Later, he would say he wasn't traumatized by witnessing the murder. He was fascinated by it. He felt excited, like he had witnessed something important, something transformative. Mike was arrested and tried for murder, but he was found not guilty by reason of insanity, his violence attributed to post-traumatic stress disorder from Vietnam. He was sent to a Texas state mental hospital for 4 years and then released. The message the Wildcard received was clear. Violence could be explained away, consequences weren't certain, and even murder might not result in real punishment. After witnessing Jessie's murder, the Wildcard became withdrawn and sullen. He moved in with his sister Ruth and her husband Roberto, hoping for a fresh start. But Roberto turned out to be a voyeur, a peeping Tom, who prowled neighborhoods at night looking in windows. Soon, Roberto was taking the Wildcard along on these nighttime excursions, exposing him to yet another form of sexual deviance and violation of others' privacy. The Wildcard dropped out of high school in 1977, his 9th grade. By then, Mike had been released from the mental hospital, and the two began taking walks together again, continuing their twisted mentorship. The Wildcard was now fully alienated from conventional society. He had no legitimate career path, no healthy relationships, no moral framework to guide him. What he did have was a fascination with Satanism. See, his mother was a devout Catholic, but her religion had offered no protection from his father's violence, no salvation from the horrors of his childhood. Catholicism emphasized guilt, submission, restriction, all the things that made him feel powerless and afraid. Satanism offered the opposite. It celebrated transgression. It promised power through evil. It told him that his darkest impulses weren't shameful, they were expressions of his true self. The wild card dove deep into the occult, into dark imagery and satanic philosophy. He listened obsessively to AC/DC, particularly the song Night Prowler, playing it for hours on end. The lyrics spoke to him. Was that a noise outside your window? What's that shadow on the blind? As you lie there naked like a body in a tomb, suspended animation as I slip into your room. By 1982, at age 22, the wild card left Texas and moved to California. He was a drifter now, working odd jobs as a car mechanic when he worked at all, supporting himself primarily through burglary and theft. His drug use escalated too. He was using LSD regularly, later graduating to cocaine. The substances further eroded whatever remained of his impulse control, pushing him closer and closer to acting on the violent fantasies that Mike had planted in his mind years earlier. He was a walking time bomb, brain damage from childhood abuse, explicitly trained in violence by a serial killer, substance addicted, and ideologically committed to a philosophy that celebrated evil. All he needed now was an opportunity. In April 1984, 2 months before the Jenny Vinkow murder that police would initially identify as his first killing, the wild card committed a crime that wouldn't be connected to him for 25 years. 9-year-old Mei Lung was playing in the basement of her apartment building in San Francisco's Tenderloin district, looking for a lost $1 bill with her brother. A man approached and told her to follow him, that he would help her find the money. Once they were alone in the basement, he beat, raped, and strangled the little girl before stabbing her to death with a switchblade. Then he hung her partially nude body from a pipe by her blouse, displaying her like a trophy. It wasn't until 2009, when DNA technology had advanced, that investigators matched his DNA to evidence from that crime scene. If Mei Lung was indeed his first victim, and authorities tend to believe she was, then several things become clear. First, he was capable of extreme violence against even the most innocent, vulnerable victims. Second, he was able to conceal his involvement in major crimes, operating below the radar of law enforcement. And third, there was likely no gradual escalation. He went from burglar to child killer in a single horrific leap. 2 months later came the Jenny Vinkow murder in Los Angeles. Then, silence. For nearly 9 months, there were no attacks that police could connect to him, which strengthened their belief that Vinkow's killing was an anomaly. It's possible the wild card committed other crimes during this period that were never solved, but the documented killing spree wouldn't resume until March 1985. Now, it's worth noting that those 9 months of apparent inactivity coincided with Los Angeles hosting the 1984 Summer Olympics, a time when the city was celebrating, when the Lakers were in their Showtime era chasing the NBA championship. Los Angeles felt vibrant and alive. Residents had no idea the terror that was about to descend. On March 17, 1985, the wild card struck twice in one night. First, he shot 22-year-old Maria Hernandez as she pulled into her garage in Rosemead. The bullet hit her car keys, which she had instinctively raised to protect her face, ricocheting off and saving her life. Her roommate, 34-year-old Dale Okazaki, wasn't so lucky. The Wildcard shot him in the head. Then, within an hour, he pulled 30-year-old Sai-Lian Veronica Yu from her car in Monterey Park and shot her twice, killing her. 3 attacks, 2 murders, all in one night. The media began reporting on a walk-in killer or valley intruder, someone who entered homes and attacked without warning. But investigators didn't yet realize these crimes were connected to a broader pattern. 10 days later, on March 27th, he returned to a home he had burglarized a year earlier in Whittier. This time, he didn't just steal, he killed. Vincent Zazzara, 64, was shot in the head as he slept. His wife Maxine, 44, woke to the gunshot. She fought back, managing to escape her bindings and grab a shotgun. But the gun wasn't loaded. When she pulled the trigger and heard only a click, her fate was sealed. He shot her 3 times. But he wasn't finished. Apparently enraged that she had nearly shot him, he went to the kitchen and got a large carving knife. He carved an inverted cross into Maxine's chest, a satanic symbol. Then he gouged out both of her eyes with the knife and took them with him in a jewelry box, keeping them in his apartment as a trophy. Police found footprints at the Zazzara scene, distinctive prints from Avia sneakers, a brand that wasn't common in the United States at the time. They also matched the .22 caliber bullets to previous crime scenes. For the first time, investigators began to suspect they were dealing with a serial killer. But the attacks were so varied, so random, that many detectives resisted this conclusion. Serial killers typically had patterns. They targeted a specific type of victim, operated in a specific area, used consistent methods. This killer seemed to follow no rules at all. Detective Gil Carrillo of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department was one of the first to connect the dots. When a series of child abductions occurred in February and March, young girls who were sexually assaulted and then released, Carrillo noticed that the children's descriptions of their attacker matched the description Maria Hernandez had given. All described a tall, thin man with curly hair, bulging eyes, wide-spaced, rotting teeth, and terrible breath. All mentioned he wore dark clothing, often a members-only style jacket. Carrillo took his theory to homicide detective Frank Salerno, a legendary investigator who'd solved the Hillside Stranglers case years earlier. Initially skeptical, the crime seemed too varied to be one person, Salerno eventually agreed. The evidence was mounting. The shoe prints matched, the ballistics matched. Despite the random victim selection, they were likely looking for one killer. In May and June, the pace of attacks accelerated. In addition to the Zazzaras, the Wildcard killed 66-year-old Bill Doy, attacked 16-year-old Whitney Bennett with a tire iron, she survived, killed 60-year-old Joyce Nelson, and sexually assaulted Sophie Dickman. In nearly every case, he left those distinctive Avia shoe prints. The media coverage intensified. Residents of Southern California were terrified. Gun sales spiked. People who had never locked their windows started installing security systems. Neighborhood watch groups formed throughout the San Fernando and San Gabriel valleys. The Wildcard seemed to enjoy the attention. At some crime scenes, he left satanic symbols, pentagrams drawn on walls, on victims' bodies, carved into flesh. He forced some victims to swear to Satan during assaults. He told one survivor, "Don't look at me." But the command itself was a form of psychological torture, making victims aware of his face while forbidding them from seeing it. In late July, the killing spree reached a fever pitch. He murdered Leela and Maxon Knighting in Glendale, then on the same morning killed Chinarong Kovananth in Sun Valley, sexually assaulting Kovananth's wife, Somkid. A few days later, he attacked Chris and Virginia Peterson in Northridge. Both somehow survived being shot in the head. Then came attacks in Diamond Bar, where he again shot the husband and raped the wife, forcing her to swear allegiance to Satan. By August, he had even expanded his territory to San Francisco. He killed Peter Pan, 66, and raped and shot his wife Barbara, 62. She survived. At that crime scene, he used lipstick to write "Jack the Knife" on the wall and drew a pentagram. He had helped himself to food from their kitchen, vomited it up, and even ejaculated at the scene, leaving behind evidence that would prove crucial, though investigators didn't know it yet. San Francisco Mayor Dianne Feinstein held an ill-advised press conference, revealing for the first time that police had connected the cases through ballistics and the distinctive shoe print. This information had intentionally been withheld from the media. Feinstein held up a composite sketch of the suspect and said, quote, "Somewhere in the Bay Area, someone is renting a room, an apartment, or a home to this vicious serial killer. I'm hoping that people will look at this composite drawing," end quote. Investigators were furious. Revealing these details potentially allowed the killer to dispose of evidence. And indeed, the Wildcard later confessed that after hearing Feinstein's announcement, he threw his Avia shoes off the Golden Gate Bridge. The task force was drowning in tips, thousands of calls from frightened citizens reporting suspicious activity. But they were also accumulating real evidence. They had the shoe prints, the .22 caliber bullets, and a crucial break, a stolen orange Toyota that had been used in one of the attacks. The breakthrough came from a young man named James Romero in Mission Viejo. On August 24th, Romero saw an unfamiliar orange Toyota station wagon in his neighborhood and wrote down part of the license plate. It included the numbers 8 and 2. That information hit the news, and another man came forward who said his friend had recently had an orange Toyota station wagon stolen in Chinatown. The plates included the numbers 8 and 2. Police located the vehicle in a parking lot in downtown Los Angeles. The Orange County Crime Lab processed it and hit pay dirt, a single fingerprint on the rearview mirror. But California's fingerprint system wasn't fully automated yet, meaning they couldn't just upload the print to a system for automatic comparison. They needed a suspect to manually compare it against. Meanwhile, other leads were developing. A local woman told police her father had befriended someone who bragged about having inside information on the case, a man from El Paso, Texas. In San Francisco, a parallel investigation involving a stolen bracelet led to a friend of the suspect providing investigators with a name. Police found 8 people with that same name in their fingerprint database. They manually compared those prints to the one pulled from the Toyota, and they found a match. The man in question had a record: petty theft, grand theft auto, minor drug charges. They pulled his 1984 booking photo. The informant in San Francisco confirmed it. It was the same guy. On August 29, 1985, police made a calculated decision. They could try to track the Wildcard down quietly, or they could release his name and photo to the public, effectively turning all of Los Angeles into a manhunt. They chose the latter. On August 30th, the Wildcard's mugshot hit every major newspaper and television station in California. The man, now subject of a nationwide manhunt, an especially frenzied one in Southern California, happened to have been in Arizona visiting family, completely unaware that he had been identified. On the morning of August 31st, 1985, he returned to Los Angeles by bus. As he walked from the bus terminal to an East Los Angeles convenience store, he walked right past police officers who were staking out the terminal, but apparently didn't recognize him. In the store, an elderly Hispanic woman did recognize him. She called out, "El Matador," the killer. The Wildcard picked up a Spanish-language newspaper, La Opinión, and saw his own face staring back at him from the front page with the headline, "Invasor Nocturno," Night Invader. He ran. Fleeing across 6 lanes of the Santa Ana Freeway on foot, dodging traffic, he made it to the Boyle Heights neighborhood. He tried to carjack an unlocked Ford Mustang, But the owner, Faustino Piñon, and another man, Jose Burgoyne, pulled him out of the car. He ran again. A few blocks away, he tried another carjacking. Angelina de la Torre was in her car when he screamed at her in Spanish to give him the keys. She refused. Her husband, Manuel, ran out of the house and hit Ramirez in the head with a metal pole. The commotion brought out the neighbors. Dozens of residents poured into the street, surrounding the man they recognized from the newspapers. They beat him with whatever they could grab: fence posts, metal rods, fists. The Wildcard tried to escape, but the crowd was too big, too angry. They had lived in fear all summer, and now the source of that fear was here, in their neighborhood, vulnerable. They weren't about to let him escape. Someone called the police. When officers arrived, they had to push through the crowd to prevent them from killing the Wildcard. He was bloody, beaten, and terrified. The predator had become the prey. As police put him in the squad car, he said in Spanish, "It's me, it's me, it's me. I'm lucky the cops got here." At the Hollenbeck police station, crowds gathered outside, cheering as detectives Gil Carrillo and Frank Salerno escorted their prisoner to a transport vehicle. After more than a year of terror, after at least 13 murders and dozens of other violent crimes, the Wildcard was in custody. The trial began in July 1988, delayed multiple times by various legal maneuvers. The Wildcard showed no remorse. Before leaving his first court appearance, he held up his hand to display a pentagram he had drawn on his palm and shouted, "Hail Satan," to the courtroom. This was in the midst of the satanic panic of the late 1980s, so the courtroom salutation was akin to dousing a brush fire with gasoline. And the trial itself became a spectacle. The Wildcard was no longer the terrified, hunted man he had been when surrounded by furious Los Angelinos. No, now he played to the cameras, smirked at victims' families, and cultivated his image as an agent of evil. He received fan mail from women who found him attractive or fascinating. The dark charisma that had helped him gain some of his victims' trust before attacking them now attracted a twisted fan base. In September 1989, after a trial that cost over $1.8 million, the Wildcard was convicted of 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. The jury sentenced him to 19 death penalties, one of the highest death penalty counts in American history. When asked if he had anything to say after sentencing, he responded, quote, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland," end quote. He spent 23 years on death row at San Quentin State Prison. In 1996, he married Doreen Leo, a magazine editor who had been writing to him since 1985. She divorced him in 2009 when DNA evidence connected him to the 1984 murder of 9-year-old Mei Lung. Apparently all of those other killings were acceptable to her, but the rape and murder of a child was a brush too far. On June 7th, 2013, the Wildcard died, but not by the state's hand, as you might expect. Despite his multiple death sentences, he ultimately died of complications from B-cell lymphoma. He was 53 years old. He never expressed remorse for his crimes. People involved in the case, detectives, criminologists, psychiatrists, invariably described him as an unrepentant psychopath. The man we've called the Wildcard went by another, better-known moniker, the Night Stalker. His real name was Ricardo Munoz Ramirez, better known as Richard Ramirez, though he was often called Rick by people who knew him. His story, of course, isn't just about one man's evil. It's about how violence perpetuates itself across generations, how childhood trauma can create adult monsters, and how explicit training in sadism can override whatever innate moral compass a person might have possessed. Miguel Ramirez showed his young cousin how to kill, normalize sexual violence, and presented murder as an achievement. Julian Ramirez taught his son that physical abuse was how men maintained control, and brother-in-law Roberto helped fuel his sexual deviancy by taking him out on peeping Tom prowls. All those men helped create the Night Stalker, though none paid a price for their role in his formation. The randomness of Ramirez's victim selection, which made him so terrifying and so difficult to catch, reflected his psychology. He didn't kill because he had a specific grudge or a particular sexual fixation. He apparently killed because he enjoyed killing itself, because it made him feel powerful, because it was what Miguel had taught him powerful men did. The specific victims were almost irrelevant. What mattered was the experience of total control, of being, as Miguel had said, godlike. The 1985 summer of terror that Ramirez inflicted on Southern California left scars that remain today. Survivors still struggle with PTSD. Family members of victims still mourn their losses. The neighborhoods where he hunted still remember that fear. That summer when opening a window or forgetting to lock a door could mean death. But Ramirez's capture also demonstrated something important about community resilience. When his photograph was finally released to the public, it wasn't sophisticated detective work that ended his freedom. It was ordinary citizens who recognized him, chased him, and held him until police arrived. The residents of East Los Angeles, the community he thought he could disappear into, were the ones who brought him down. To research this case, I relied on Philip Carlo's The Night Stalker, The Life and Crimes of Richard Ramirez, and the 2021 Netflix documentary Night Stalker, The Hunt for a Serial Killer, which features interviews with detectives Gil Carrillo and Frank Salerno. I also drew from contemporary news coverage in the Los Angeles Times, San Francisco Chronicle, and CBS News, plus the academic text Dark Minds, Deadly Deeds, Unmasking Serial Killers for Psychological Analysis. The Catalyst is a production of Grab Bag Collab, a division of Just Us Media. It's written and narrated by me, Amber Hunt, and edited, engineered, and produced by Amanda Rossman.